Welcome in, everybody, to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is August 22nd, a Friday, and we are one day away from college football being back in our lives. I will give a full breakdown of Week 0. We'll get into all the FBS games. I'll give a little bit of love to the FCS on the backside of this weekend, but didn't necessarily have too much of an insight on those games going in, so we'll cover all the FBS games coming up this weekend. Obviously, Farmageddon will lead us off a little bit more in-depth there. Then we'll get to Dan Mullen returning, Kansas going into a year where they could be the sneaky team in the Big 12, Stanford, a must-win out there in Hawaii, and they are not favored in that game. We'll get into all of that. In the second segment, we'll jump into fall camp intel. A ton of quarterbacks have been named around the country, and a lot of different news has come out around quarterbacks around the country. One battle at Missouri might will extend likely into the season just a little bit. Then we'll get into my favorite bets for the 2025 season. I have 4 win total bets. I have 4 Heisman bets that you might be willing to take a little bit of money on. None of them are my outright pick for the Heisman, but some of them are just very, very good value as I see it going into the season. And then we'll finish it out. We'll do a little bit of a weekend wrap up. A big thing happened in the SEC yesterday. Kind of glad that I had to push this off until Friday. Been a little bit sick this week, but at the end of the day, we are here. We're going to break it all down for you guys, and let's waste no more time. Let's get into the Week 0 preview. There is a really, really good game tomorrow. There's a top 25 matchup between Iowa State and Kansas State over there in Dublin, Ireland. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be so much fun to watch. We're already getting videos of these fans being in the city, enjoying their time, having a Guinness or two that has the Kansas State logo on top. It's been incredible to watch. It's college football being back is what it is, and it's an incredible, incredible thing. But this is going to be an incredible game. It's going to be a game that really does define a lot of what's going on in the Big 12 this upcoming year. I've said it earlier when we were talking about this game. I believe the loser will not be in the Big 12 championship. Obviously, they're not outright eliminated. Obviously, they still have plenty of time to figure out some of that stuff. The reality is this is going to be a huge matchup, and I find it really hard to believe that either of these teams are going to be able to waltz through their schedule without a couple of losses after this game. So if Iowa State falls, I think they're probably not making to the Big 12 championship. The same exact thing with Kansas State. So no one's getting eliminated outright tomorrow. I think someone could be in really, really dire straits in a conference where you're going to need as much goodwill and as much buffer room as you can possibly get. But Kansas State comes in as the favorite to win the conference. Iowa State not far off from the top. About everyone is not far off from the top, frankly. But both return their starting quarterbacks, both return both coordinators, both return their head coaches. It is a very, very stable program against a very stable program. Now, there are a couple of big losses. Obviously, Iowa State losing Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel on the outside. Huge. You don't usually have 2 top 90 picks or top 3-round picks at the wide receiver position at Iowa State. That just doesn't happen very often. It's probably not going to happen this year. Now, you have some really talented guys, and we'll get into them here in a second, but I do think they have enough guys to replace those guys. I also think it might be a tough pull in Week 0, but we'll figure that out as we go on. Obviously, with Kansas State, the story is Avery Johnson. Can he make that leap this upcoming year? Can Dylan Edwards kind of become a little bit more of that down-in, down-out back? Probably going to get a lot of Joe Jackson in this game if I had to imagine at the running back position for Kansas State, but I do think Dylan Edwards will factor in at some point. There are really talented players all over this football field. Obviously, it might not be the outright, Jeremiah Smiths of the world or Ryan Williams or anything crazy, but Jace Brown plays some really good football. I think there's some transfers over there at Iowa State that are going to be really, really good players, and a number of things that you're going to want to watch very, very closely. So you won't know too much about these teams going in. Obviously, people will try to convince you they know everything about how this game is going to go. It's all over the place. Until these guys kick it off, we don't know what these teams are going to be. We don't know how they're going to go about their business. We don't know how big of losses they've had on either side of the ball. We're going to find out in a hurry. I can almost promise you that. I think these two teams are going to be a great matchup for each other, and I think it's going to show us where does everyone stand in the Big 12, at least these two teams. Where do they stand in the hodgepodge that is the Big 12 as of right now? But there's a number of things to watch in this game. Right now, KSU is favored by 3, 2.5, 3.5, somewhere in that realm, depending on where you're looking. Over-under at 49.5. I'd love the under in that one. I'll be totally honest with you. I do not love these teams scoring a ton in their first game, but at the end of the day, I love these quarterbacks, and I think they have a lot of confidence going into this game. As far as I see it, though, I think there's one matchup that everyone's going to want to watch and a couple of players that everyone's going to want to know, and it's the run game for Iowa State against the linebackers, or really the defense for Kansas State, but I'll single in on 2 linebackers here. For Iowa State, Carson Hansen and Abu Sama are elite. It's a great running back duo, about as good as you're going to find on the Kansas State side. Probably a little bit better, frankly, than Dylan Edwards and Joe Jackson, but regardless, a very good duo. And when you come to Iowa State, the first thing you talk about is the loss of Jalen Noel, is the loss of Jaden Higgins, and these guys got to pick up the slack. There's no doubt about it. I think Abu Sama is uniquely talented, very good back. I think Carson Hansen's more your steady hand in that backfield, probably going to be the starter for this team, although I think the split's going to be pretty even, if I had to imagine, between these two players. For Kansas State, Austin Romaine's about as good of a linebacker as you're going to find in the country. Definitely in this conference, him and Jacob Rodriguez really do set the pace for linebackers in this conference. The guy next to him is no slouch. Desmond Purnell is a very good player. Absolutely someone that understands this defense very well and will be sitting in the middle of that defense along with Austin Romaine. It's a duo that is really talented and definitely can be a huge force for Iowa State to deal with in this game. But a couple of things that I'm watching closely. Obviously, the run game for Iowa State is going to be huge, but you got to find the pass catchers. You got to find the guys that are going to make big-time plays for you. Losing Jalen Noel and losing Jaden Higgins is huge. It's massive for this team. I love Chase Sowell. I think bringing him in from Eastern Carolina is a massive deal. I think he's a player that can really develop into a huge player for this team, a 1,000-yard type receiver for this team. Can you do it in game one is the big-time question. Xavier Townsend comes in from UCF, another very talented guy, a little bit longer than Chase Sowell, but still very talented, very rangy, absolutely a guy that can become a big-time player for them. Again, does he have the confidence with Rocco Becht in that first game, or does it take a couple of weeks to get everything under control? That'll be the big-time question they have to find. Big plays through the air in this game, or Kansas State can just sit down with those two big-time linebackers and make life really tough for you inside the box. And then you got Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards leading the run game for Kansas State. It is a really good run game, and it's one that I think can be really multiple. When you have a guy like Dylan Edwards, you can play around with a lot of different things. You can play around with two running back sets if you really want to, and have Dylan Edwards split out into slot, split out outside, and then play around with him from there. He is a very dynamic player. If you can get this guy's feet under him, get him going downhill, he's really hard to stop. And then Joe Jackson, a very tough player to take down. Iowa State was below 100th in the country when it comes to rush yards allowed per game. I believe they gave up somewhere in the realm of 160 to 180 per game. If Kansas State can get this ball rolling early on in the run game, it's going to be really hard for Iowa State to slow them down. And then finally, does Avery Johnson take the leap? I think everyone knows, at least relatively, what Rocco Becht is going into this year. I think they know he's a very talented quarterback. Maybe doesn't have the unique athletic ability that some other guys in this conference have, but is a very talented kid and absolutely someone that's going to run that offense very efficiently. With Avery Johnson, you have a couple more questions. I think you look at him and you say, very talented kid, can do a lot of really incredible things on the football field. The legs are obviously the kind of thing you write home about. Very talented with his legs extending plays. Does he take the leap that they need him to take in this year? Because they are the favorites to win this conference. They are coming in as the expected favorites. I think he's coming in as the expected, probably best quarterback or one of the best quarterbacks in this conference. He's got to take a leap to do that. He's got to be able to jump over the Sam Levitts and the Josh Hoovers and all of those guys in this conference, the Rocco Bechts in this conference, and this would be the perfect time to do it. And I think they will. I think Kansas State will win this game. I'm going to take them -3. Obviously, would love if it was -2.5. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think both these teams are going to relatively struggle to get everything moving. That being said, I think when you look at the Big 12 right now, these teams might be a little bit further along when it comes to being a quote-unquote finished product in Week 1 because of the comfortability in the offense, because of the quarterbacks coming back, both play callers coming back, the head coach coming back. You're going to know what these teams are, at least in some realm, on Monday. You're going to know exactly how they're going to go about their business. You won't know exactly how high their ceiling is or what they will become, but we'll have a pretty good idea of how these teams are going to at least go about their business the rest of the season. We're going to have a pretty good idea of which is the better team, and we might just have an idea of which team is getting eliminated from the Big 12 championship. As of right now, I'm going to say it's Iowa State, and I think Kansas State puts on a pretty good show in this one. To be totally fair, I think it's going to be a relatively defensive battle, but Avery Johnson makes just enough plays for Kansas State to win this one. Moving forward, we got Idaho State out UNLV. this should be a tune-up game for UNLV. They're going to play both quarterbacks with Alex Orji and Anthony Colandrea. We will see both of them. So we will see kind of what that looks like. Is Anthony Colandrea a little bit more of the passing guy while Alex Orji runs the ball a little bit more often? Is it just an entire split between what their duties are, both of them passing the same amount, both of them running? It'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out, and it might just be a two-quarterback system relatively going forward for UNLV, depending on how this game plays out. But they're favored by 24.5 in this game. They should win this game comfortably. There is no reason to believe that UNLV should not be able to run away with this one. Idaho State's not a great FCS team. So at the end of the day, I think UNLV should be a really fun team to watch. A lot of really good former Power 5 talent on that team, Power 4 talent on that team. But at the end of the day, I think UNLV should roll in this one. Would probably take Idaho State plus the points, but at the end of the day, going to just add the Kansas State, Iowa State one to my full pick total for the season. But these are really fun games, and I think UNLV should be really fun to watch, and they should get a comfortable win. Fresno State at Kansas State is a very interesting one. You got Kansas kind of being the team that everyone seems to be forgetting about in the Big 12. Not to say that they're not getting any picks for a conference title, but last year at the end of the season, when we saw Jalen Daniels really put it all together, they took down a number of teams. They took down an Iowa State team that very luckily got their way back into the Big 12 championship. They took down a number of big-time teams towards the end of the season and torpedoed a lot of seasons in the Big 12. If they carry that over, they're going to be a really good football team. And it sounds like Jalen Daniels looks the part throughout the entirety of the offseason. They're favored by 13 in this game. The pass catchers are going to have to make a big-time leap. Emmanuel Henderson's the guy that I'm watching very, very closely. But overall, I think Kansas has got a roll in this game. And I think they will. I think they will win by at least 14 points. And I think Jalen Daniels will show why people probably shouldn't have forgot about him too quickly. And frankly, I might be in that group just a little bit. Sam Houston at Western Kentucky, a really fun game and a really interesting game between the quarterbacks. I think Western Kentucky is favored by 10.5, so there is a little bit of a gap here. But Sam Houston's Hunter Watson is a very, very tough runner. He's a guy that is not going to be denied those extra 3 yards to get a first down. Very, very tough to defend. The fun part about Western Kentucky is they replaced a really talented passer in Caden Veltkamp with maybe a more talented passer, and Maverick McIver. He comes over from Abilene Christian, was a very, very good quarterback for them, and absolutely a guy that can continue to run this WKU offense with a lot of ability. He is going to let it fly. It's going to be a really, really fun, fast-paced offense that he's going to be very comfortable in. I'll take Western Kentucky in this one. I think they can win this one relatively comfortably. I think Hunter Watson makes a couple of plays here and there for the Bearcats, but at the end of the day, I think Maverick McIver puts on a little bit of a show in this one, frankly. And then finally, Stanford goes to Hawaii in the opening week of the season, and they're underdogs. Hawaii is favored by 2.5 in this one. I think they're playing this one on like a high school field as of right now, so that'll be interesting to watch. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of really fun players in this game, mainly on the Hawaii side, weirdly enough. Now, for Stanford, they're starting the Oregon State transfer Ben Goldbranson at quarterback. That'll be an interesting fit. He's absolutely a guy that put together some good football for Oregon State at times last year. Definitely someone that's going to need to take a step up this year. No doubt about that. So we'll see how that unfolds. For Hawaii, Pofele Ashlock is a very good wide receiver, is absolutely someone that is going to make a big-time impact in this game. They have a lot of dudes on the outside, frankly. They have two dudes that are absolutely going to be a nightmare for Stanford to handle. I think Stanford needs this one, but I don't think they'll get it. I think Hawaii is a very, very good football team. I think they're going to be able to do some really fun things on the outside, and I just think Stanford's going to be a little bit of a tough watch this year. Sorry, Cardinal fans, but at the end of the day, I am going to take Hawaii to win this one. I'm going to take Pofele Ashlock to make a number of big-time plays in this game, and for Hawaii to get a big-time win, and Stanford to be probably looking for their first win for quite some time this season. But it's going to be awesome. It's college football. At the end of the day, I could have read any two teams in the entire country. It's college football. So we're going to enjoy it all. Now, we do get a top 25 matchup, so I cannot wait for that one to unfold. Going to be a huge one in the Big 12 when we talk about the CFP down the road. We'll probably go back to that Week 0 game between Iowa State and Kansas State. But we'll take our first break here. When we come back, we got fall camp intel. We got a number of quarterbacks that have been named to their starting job. A little bit late on some of these, so apologies for that. But at the end of the day, we'll jump into all the news right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about week 0. Cannot wait for everything to get underway tomorrow. It's going to be really fun one over there in Dublin, and one that definitely does define the end of the season. It'll start the season in week 0. Cannot wait for that one. But let's get into some fall camp intel. There is a number of things to talk about and a number of quarterbacks to talk about. We'll mainly get into the quarterbacks today, as well as a couple of injury news, and then on Monday we'll get into a little bit more nitty-gritty stuff. There's a big time receiver showing up at A&M. Miami's back end's playing really well in practice right now. A number of things to talk about on Monday, but let's get into the quarterbacks. Let's focus on that today. And we'll start over there in Columbus, Ohio. It is going to be Julian Sayin, as a lot of us expected pretty much from the start of the offseason until now. It was going to be Julian Sayin. I think the coaching staff thought that as well. He finally has taken the job. I think he had a great scrimmage this past weekend. He is going to be the starter for the Texas game, and it's a very interesting set of circumstances. I think Lincoln Kienholz is going to be a part of the game plan. I think he is going to be used in goal line packages, in third downs, and short fourth downs, because he's a little bit more of a capable runner. He's absolutely a guy that can extend plays, a little bit more of that Will Howard type player. Julian Sayin, a little bit more of that C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young type player that Ohio State is familiar with, especially in the C.J. Stroud case. But at the end of the day, very talented kid. Can make every throw in the book. Absolutely someone that I think at the end of the season is going to be regarded as a top 10 quarterback in college football. I think he's going to be viewed as a Heisman finalist going into 2026. The problem is quarterbacks making their very first start against the number 1 team in the country are 0-18. So that's the question you have to answer. To be totally fair, a lot of those games are against layups in week 1. Some of those games have been big-time games, but at the end of the day, this one's going to be fun. It's two of the more talented throwers of the football that you will see in the entire country this year, going at it in a couple of days and 8 days down there in Columbus, Ohio. Julian Sayin will be leading the Buckeyes going into this one. Notre Dame named C.J. Carr their starter going into the season. Another one that I think everyone expected throughout the offseason. Now, I think Kenny Minchey made this a little bit tougher than Lincoln Kienholz did on Julian Sayin. So Kenny Minchey, again, absolutely will be a part of this game plan. He will be a part of the run game. He will be part of the red zone if I had to imagine. He's too athletic of a kid to keep on the sideline. So I think he will be a part of this team. I also think the leash is not going to be all that long for C.J. Carr. So if he goes into Miami, really struggles in week 1, I don't know if he keeps that job too much longer. So this is going to be an interesting one to watch going into the season. I also think C.J. Carr is a really good player. I think he ups the game that they can do in the pass game a ton. I think he makes that offense really dangerous and possibly open some more doors for Jeremiah Love in the run game. I think Kenny Minchey would have done more than fine, but you would have seen more stacked boxes with Kenny Minchey back there at quarterback. With C.J. Carr, he's going to have to prove it now. He's going to have to prove that teams have to respect the pass, but he's a very talented passer. I think he's going to be a force for people to deal with, and he's going to be a guy that we're going to be talking about at the end of the season, much like Julian Sayin, as maybe this guy can win the Heisman in 2026. Joey Aguilar has been named the starter over at Tennessee. Another one we expected. Now, he did have to beat out Jake Merklinger in a short period of time. So it's very interesting, but it does complete the trade between UCLA and Tennessee. It sounds like they're paying just about the same amount as well. So it is an outright trade between Nico Iamaleava and Joey Aguilar. We'll see how it works out. It's going to be one of the more interesting kind of subplots in this college football season is Joey Aguilar against Nico Iamaleava and how that plays out. I think the big thing to remember here is Joey Aguilar is not going to put the ball in his pocket. I can almost promise you that. So Tennessee fans that have been watching these games and said, that guy's wide open, why isn't Nico ripping the ball? I don't think you're going to have that anymore. I think you're going to have a guy that steps back, that rips balls when they're there. He's going to make some mistakes. I can almost promise you that. He is not going to be this perfect quarterback by any means. He's going to throw the ball into windows that might be a little bit tight. But at the end of the day, this Tennessee offense does not work to the top capability if you can't push the ball downfield. And if you're not aggressive with the ball downfield, this kid will be. I can almost promise you that. He's a very talented kid. Obviously, some big-time questions around him taking the big-time leap up in competition. He's going to make some big plays. He's going to make some boneheaded plays. I think the Tennessee offense is going to be more fun, but a little bit more bipolar, I suppose, going into this season with Joey Aguilar rather than Nico Iamaleava. Doesn't mean the ceiling couldn't be higher with this kid at quarterback. Steve Angeli won the Syracuse job, another one that I fully expected him to beat out Ricky Collins, but Ricky Collins is a very talented kid. It didn't take many practices for Steve Angeli to beat him out either. He was a portal guy in the spring, so he kind of came on and 15 or so practices and won this job. And it's not surprising to me really at all. A lot of stability with this kid, a little bit more better of a thrower of the football than I think he gets credit for, but is a little bit of that dual threat. Now, Kyle McCord wasn't a year ago, so we'll see how that kind of develops, how he does he use the run game a little bit? Is he a little bit more of that drop back pocket passer with Ricky Collins being a little bit more of that run threat? There are a number of ways they can go about this. Overall, I think this guy brings stability. And I think when we're talking about Syracuse going into this season, they had a quarterback that was really, really good a year ago. I think they just need to be able to know that the quarterback they have back there is not making mistakes, is not pushing the ball into really tight windows, and is just making the right play. And I think they got that in Steve Angeli. I don't know if it'll be a banner season when it comes to the numbers. I think he will put up a very nice season, and Syracuse will be plenty happy about this decision. Jaren Sagapolo-Tele is going to take over at Cal as the QB1. This one was a little bit surprising to me. He beat out Devin Brown, the transfer from Ohio State, for this job, and he left Oregon pretty early on to get the playing time at Cal, so it's paying off for him. He's a very interesting player, absolutely a guy that can rip the ball, someone that I think he's going to make a lot of classic freshman mistakes. I don't think Cal's going to be a great football team this year. I do think going into 2026, he could make this team very, very excited if they're not eliminating their college football program, which is something we can talk about a little bit later on, but that's definitely something that could be happening. I don't want to say soon, but at some point in the future. Regardless, as of right now, you have your quarterback for this season. I think he is uniquely talented. Bear Bachmeier has won the BYU job, another one that I fully expected. I think this kid was going to win it the second that Jake Retzlaff walked out the door. Like McKay Hillstead, they're probably not starting a kid that's 5'10 or 5'8 at quarterback. I'm just being totally honest. So Bear Bachmeier, he's going to be your quarterback. If he wears 47, he better play good quarterback, and he better be able to run through people, because I don't think you can wear 47 and not be a guy that is willing to run through someone's face. But at the end of the day, he's a very talented kid. I think there's going to be mistakes. I think BYU is making this decision because they want him to be the future. And now they have a really talented kid coming in next year in Ryder Lyons. But at the end of the day, I think this is more the ceiling that this kid brings, and I think he will bring some really good plays. I think he'll have some really disastrous plays, and I think they will lose certain games because of this. But at the end of the day, I think that was going to be the case the second that Jake Retzlaff walked out the door. So not necessarily a massive deal, but absolutely something to watch. Missouri is going to play both quarterbacks against Central Arkansas in Week 1. This is going to be something to watch. Bo Pribula left his team to go be the starter at Missouri. He has not won that job, and he's been given more than a fair chance to win that job. He has not done that yet. He better win that job, because they're putting quite a bit of money into this kid being their starter this upcoming year. Now, Sam Horn can get the job done. I feel very confident in that. I think this kid understands the offense. I think that's why he's still in this quarterback battle. But at the end of the day, this got to be Bo Pribula's team. If he went all that way, took all that money in Missouri, he's going to be very upset if that was the case. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a really interesting thing to watch in Week 1. I doubt they'll have their answer after Central Arkansas, so this might go into Week 2 and maybe even into Week 3, but they got to figure it out here at least relatively soon. Auburn could play 3 quarterbacks in Week 1. Hugh Freeze was asked about the possibility of playing 3 quarterbacks against Baylor. He said, yeah. He's not going to play 3 quarterbacks against Baylor unless he's outright out of his mind, which maybe he is at the end of the day. I don't know. But at the end of the day, if he was, it would be Jackson Arnold, Ashton Daniels, and Deuce Knight. And I'll be totally honest with you, I think Deuce Knight's going to be the starter for this team at some point this year. I think that kid is uniquely talented. I think there's going to come a point where Hugh Freeze might have to save his job just a little bit, and you throw the freshman out there. But at the end of the day, we'll see what happens here. They already have 3 play callers for every single down, first, second, and third. Now they have 3 quarterbacks. They have a lot of different options for how they can go about this thing. But at the end of the day, if they're planning to play 3 quarterbacks against Baylor and against Dave Aranda, it's not going to go well. I'm just going to be totally honest. These guys are going to make mistakes. These wide receivers are going to be very confused, especially when you put a lefty in there after a righty. It's going to be a weird thing. I don't think they're going to play 3. I think they're going to play 1, maybe 2 with Ashton Daniels. But at the end of the day, you never really count out anything when you're talking about Hugh Freeze. We'll see what happens, and I think if they play 3, it's going to be an absolute nightmare against Baylor and Dave Aranda. Injury updates. Quentin Joyner is out for the season. This stinks. It's a very, very talented kid that just never really got the injury luck that he needed. He always felt a little bit hampered when he was at USC. He was a guy that went for a number of really, really big-time plays, had more yards per carry than a number of quarterbacks had yards per attempt a year ago. It's a very talented kid, and losing him changes the dynamic in that room. Now, Jacoby Williams is someone that was very, very talented his freshman year. Same with Cameron Dickey. So they have a talented duo. There's no doubt about that. I think this guy was going to tote the rock a lot, and I think he was going to kind of lead this offense in a number of different ways. This is a big-time loss. There's no doubt about that. Everyone else is going to have to pull their weight, and I think Jacoby Williams and Cameron Dickey are more than capable of doing that. We won't know until midway through the season. I think Quentin Joyner just made that thing a lot more stable. Now it's a little bit rickety at times. Andrew Babalola is expected to miss the season, likely, with Michigan. This is definitely a loss for Michigan. Now, I don't think he was going to start. I think it's kind of that Texas situation where likely was not going to be the starter, but now Brady Norton and Ty Haywood and guys that they probably were ready to let sit and get comfortable for a year have to be ready. Now, they might not have to play, they might not have to start for this team, but at some point they're going to have to be ready the same way a Nick Brooks or a Jaden Chapman is for Texas right now with Andre Kojo going down. So this is a very talented player. This is a kid that is going to be a 3-year starter for this team if I had to imagine. Losing him for the season is not ideal. They should be okay at the tackle position, but definitely does get a little bit thinner, and Brady Norton's going to have to be fully ready to go in at left tackle or right tackle really at the drop of a hat this upcoming season because of this big-time loss. And then some good injury news. On the other side of things, Sark is no longer being cautious, quote-unquote, with C.J. Baxter. He said he is ready to roll. We're going to roll him out there against Ohio State, and we're going to let him do his thing. He's a very, very talented player. I think that he was what was missing from that Texas offense a year ago because they couldn't put games away. They couldn't put games away in the fourth quarter. They let way too many games become losses that were going to be close wins or let comfortable wins become close wins because they didn't have a put-away running back. I think this guy's it. So if he's 100% or at least close to it going into that Ohio State game, this Texas offense gets that a little bit more scary, and I think this guy, I think people are forgetting just how talented he was his freshman year. I think he could put on a show this year if he is fully ready, and seems like he is. According to Steve Sarkisian, he is 100%, and he will be on the field against Ohio State. That is massive for a Texas team that I think was a little bit wary of getting this guy back before really SEC play started. He's going to be back and ready to roll, and it's going to be a terrifying offense already, a little bit more terrifying with number 4 in the backfield. But we'll get to all of that, obviously, in time. We have some more fall camp stuff on Monday for sure. Definitely some different things to break down as we get into week 1. But let's take another break here. When we come back, we got to talk about my favorite bets going into this year. I have 4 win totals that I think are going to be really just layups, in my opinion. And then I got 4 Heisman bets that are a little bit out of the ordinary, but absolutely ones that might be worth just a little bit of a sprinkle. But we'll talk about it right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about a little bit of fall camp intel. A number of quarterbacks have been named around the country. Missouri's still trying to figure that out going into week 1, and a number of injury news that is not so great for some teams, really good in the case of Texas with C.J. Baxter. But we'll get into all that stuff on Monday, a number of other things to break down, including some really interesting stuff coming out of Coral Gables right now. But for right now, let's get into my favorite bets going into 2025. I got 4 win totals here. I got 4 Heisman guys that might not be at the top of your mind, but absolutely are worth just looking at on the market right about now. I do want to make something very, very clear before I get into this. I live in the state of Georgia. I will not be placing money on these bets. If you don't have money to place on these bets, please do not place money on these bets. But at the end of the day, these are the ones that I'm watching the closest. These are the ones that, in my mind, stand out to me. We'll start Georgia Tech over 7.5 wins. I cannot believe this is the number. I thought 8.5 would be a little bit more fair. If they win at Colorado in week 1, I don't think this is even a question. I think they're absolutely going to get to at least 8 wins. Even if they lose, they can absolutely do this thing. Now, they're going to be favored in just about every game that isn't Clemson or Georgia, maybe Duke as well, depending on how that season goes early on for the Blue Devils. But at the end of the day, this team is set up to do this. If they win every game that they're favored in, they'll probably be at least 9-3, maybe 10-2. If they win most of the games they're favored in, they'll be at least 8-4. This is a very good football team. They have stability in the run game. There are some worries about the offensive line losing some guys up front, no doubt about it. I think they're going to be fine. I think Brent Key's going to have these guys ready. I think they're going to have 8 wins before the Pitt game, which is the game right before Georgia. So I think they're going to be in a really good position. I think they're going to get to at least 8 wins. Frankly, I would probably bet on to over 8.5 right now if I was being totally honest, but I'll take the 7.5 because they're giving it to me. Arkansas, under 5.5 wins. I hate to do it to Sam Pittman, but I just don't see it this year. I think it's a very, very interesting team playing a nightmare of a schedule. And I think with Taylon Green, you're going to have once or twice where he makes some magic, where he does some incredible things, whether that's on the road at, at Texas or at LSU or Missouri to finish. He's going to make one of those games really interesting. The reality is, even with that, I think he's going to be a nightmare. They're going to win the first 2 games against Alabama, A&M, and Arkansas State. If they don't, they're in real trouble to lose this. But at the end of the day, then they go to Ole Miss. They go at Memphis, which is not a layup by any means. They have Notre Dame at home, and then they get into the SEC. It is an absolute nightmare for Arkansas this upcoming year. They got Tennessee, Texas A&M at home, Auburn at home, Mississippi State should be a win at home, and then at LSU, at Texas, and then Missouri to finish. It's really tough. I think they're going to be really, really fighting to get 3 wins in that last little bit of that SEC schedule. I think they're going to really be fighting to get to a bowl game this year, and I do not expect them to get to one, especially if they lose that Memphis game. They're in a lot of trouble to lose this one. Nebraska, over 7.5 wins. I can't believe this is the number, frankly, on this team. I think 8.5 would be a little bit better of a number, but I think they will get to 8 wins. They start the season at Cincinnati, Akron, and Houston Christian. They should go 3-0. Now, the Cincinnati game is a little bit up in the air. We don't really know how these two teams are going to come out of the gates. Obviously, Brendan Sorsby brings a little bit of an interesting factor to that Cincinnati team, but at the end of the day, they should be able to win that game. They're going to beat Akron. They're going to beat Houston Christian. They should be 3-0 going into the Michigan State game at home. Then they go to Maryland, to Minnesota, and then they have Northwestern at home. They could easily win 5 or 6 of those games in the first 7 games, and then you just got to win a couple more, and then you do get a little bit tougher. You got USC coming to town, you go to UCLA and Penn State, and then you finish against Iowa. You're probably going to need to get 1 or 2 of those at the end of the year. I think they will. I think there's a team that could very well go 9 or 10 wins this upcoming year. We'll see what happens in that first stretch. If they go 7-0 in that first stretch, if they win all of those games all the way up to Northwestern, this is going to be a layup. I'll be totally honest. If they go 6-1, I still feel very confident in this. If they go 5-2, I get a little bit more nervous with some of those back-end games that they have to play. But regardless, this is a very good team. I think Dylan Raiola is a really underrated quarterback in some respects going into this year, and I think they're going to get to at least 8 wins, maybe even 9, maybe even 10 and get into the playoff, but that's a conversation for another day. Utah, over 7.5 wins. I think this is the layup of the board. I think when you talk about Georgia Tech, I love that pick. I can see how it could go wrong, though. Same thing with Nebraska. I don't see how this one goes wrong. I'll be totally honest with you. Now, there are tough games on this schedule. There's no doubt about that. But if Devin Dampier is healthy and they can put together this team with a healthy quarterback behind it, I don't see how Kyle Whittingham doesn't win 8 games. Now, they should start 3-0 on the season if they beat UCLA in week 1. That is going to be a really interesting game. Obviously, Nico Iamaleava makes it really that much more interesting. Devin Dampier makes it that much more interesting. It's going to be a really fun game in week 1. They should be able to win it. If they're 3-0 going into that Texas Tech game at home, if they win that one, they're in great shape. Even if they don't, they go to West Virginia, going to be likely one of the worst teams in the Big 12. Arizona State at home, which is huge. I think they're in really good shape. I think if they go 4-2 in those first 6, and frankly, I think they're going to go better than that, but let's say they go 4-2, I still think they're in relatively good shape. They have at BYU, Colorado, Cincy at home, at Baylor, Kansas State at home, and then Kansas to finish it. I think they're absolutely going to get to 8 wins this year. I think they're almost definitely going to get to 9 wins. I'm betting them to get to 10 or 11 wins this season. So I'm fully on the Utah bandwagon. I think when I look at this 7.5, there are definitely some ways it could go wrong, but I bet comfortably that is going to go correctly, and Utah is going to get to at least 8 wins this year. Kyle Whittingham rarely misses 2 years in a row. And then my Heisman picks. I'll start with Julian Sayin at plus 2,000. This isn't my pick. These are really good value picks. And I think this kid, absolutely, he just has to drive the car. The car is an absolute Lamborghini. It will go 500 miles an hour if you let it. He can do that. He can make every pass that you need him to make. He can go through progressions very quickly. Obviously, all of this is a little bit up in the air. We don't know what's going to happen in week 1. He could have a blow-up. He could have a game where he has 3 turnovers, that Texas gets after him in the pass rush, and he makes a couple of mistakes. I still don't think it takes him out of it. He's going to have plenty of moments to redeem that week one. I think everyone understands that it is his very first start. I don't think they understand that with Arch Manning. I think they understand that with Julian Sayin. So even if he has a not great game, he just can't have a blow up in week one. And then I think he's in really good position. You just got to get the ball to number 4. You got to get the ball to number 17. You got to get the ball to number 11 and let this offense do what it does. Ryan Day is very, very good at finding these guys space. If Julian Sayin can find them in space, and I think he'll be able to, they're going to be more than fine. They're going to be a very good offense, and this kid will be at the center of it. I have Jeremiah Smith in my Heisman finalist because I think he'll overshadow this kid. This kid could very easily make it not the case and be one of the best quarterbacks in the country, put up some of the best numbers in the country, and absolutely be in New York City at the end of the year. John Mateer at plus 2,500. This is an Oklahoma play. If you believe in Oklahoma to make the steps that they're going to get to a 9-3 that probably puts them in the CFP at the end of the day, you got to like John Mateer. If they're going to do that in this season, he is going to be playing at Heisman level. I can almost promise you that. Now, the offensive line is a question. There's no doubt about that. I think the receivers are a relative question. If Deion Burks is healthy, I'm not super worried about the group, but overall, it's still a relative question going into this year. If this team hits the way that a lot of people around Norman, a lot of Oklahoma fans, and a lot of the country think that they're going to hit, this kid will be playing at a Heisman level. He will be in New York City at the end of the year. So that'll be a really interesting thing to watch. If you believe in Oklahoma, I think there are plenty of people that do. I'd bet on this kid to win the Heisman because I think he has the ability to do that. I think he has that top-end talent even coming over to the SEC and the step up in competition that it's going to be. And it's going to be very tough, no doubt about it. If they do a 9-3 season, if they do the things that they want to do around there, it's because John Mateer is playing a Heisman-level season. We went over this one. He is one of my finalists as of right now, but Jeremiah Love at plus 4,000 is crazy to me. I think if this guy is healthy, he is absolutely going to be in the running for this thing. I think CJ Carr is going to have to give this ball off a lot to this kid because it's going to be a lot to deal with, especially against a Miami team that they're plenty physical, they're plenty big. They also get pushed off the ball every now and then, and I think they could against this Notre Dame team from time to time on Saturday. If Jeremiah Love puts on a show in his very first game and they just predicate everything around that guy having success in this upcoming season, he absolutely is going to put up crazy numbers. He almost definitely is going to be in New York City, and Notre Dame will probably be 11-1 on top of that. So there will be a lot of reasons to like this kid. Obviously, the helmet he's wearing doesn't hurt by any means, but this is a very, very talented kid. I think he's going to put on a show this year. I have him in New York City. Might as well take a little bit of sprinkle if you think he's going to get there. And then the absolutely crazy long shot is Colin Simmons, the defender that I wanted to put on here, plus 30,000. It might be worth just a little bit. I know it sounds crazy. He is a guy that I think can put up crazy numbers. And I think when you look at this defensive line, or you look at this pass rush really in general for Texas, they have so many guys. Colin Simmons is the premier guy. There's no doubt about that. But when you talk about Ethan Burke, very talented guy that absolutely can take a step up. Zeno Umeozulu is going to be a nightmare for teams to deal with. I can almost promise you that. Anthony Hill coming from the second level. Same thing with Trey Moore. These guys are going to be really, really hard to deal with. It's going to be really hard to double team Colin Simmons the way that I think a lot of teams are going to want to this year. He's going to be a nightmare. If I was going to pick a defender to win this thing, I might pick Caleb Downs. I would probably pick Colin Simmons right after that. I think this kid is uniquely talented, and I think he's going to put on an absolute show this year. I'll be totally honest. I think he is downright special, and I think if he puts on the show that I expect him to, he could very well be in New York City at the very end of the season. Obviously, some things would have to fall his way in terms of Arch Manning not going crazy, Arch Manning not taking all of the attention, but he could put up some crazy numbers and maybe be the first defender to win it since Travis Hunter last year, but a little bit of a two-way there. The first I guess that's not plainly defense either with Charles Woodson. At the end of the day, would be the first one in a while to win from the defensive side of the ball. I don't necessarily think it's going to happen. If you're going to give me plus 30,000, I'm going to look at it at the very least. But we'll talk about that, obviously, in more time. We'll get into Heisman details, and I have my pick. It is going to be Cade Klubnik, in my opinion. I still think those guys are very worth looking at as we head into this season. But let's take our last break, and when we come back, we got some headlines. We got a headline that came up yesterday. The SEC is going to 9 games. I'll talk about why some people that were really pushing for that might not be super excited about the results. We'll talk about the Big Ten's terrible playoff idea and how it all ties in together right after this. So stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about my favorite bets going into this season. Might have a couple more next week depending on how I'm feeling, see if I go through a couple more and find something I really like. But at the end of the day, those are the ones I'm watching very closely. If you can get Georgia Tech over 7.5 wins right now, if you can get Utah over 7.5 wins right now, take it and sprint the other direction. If those two quarterbacks stay healthy, they're absolutely getting to 8 wins. I feel very confident in that. But let's get into a little bit of a weekend wrap up, and let's start with the news that I was a little bit happy that I had to wait until this late in the week to do this, because huge news broke yesterday. The SEC is moving to 9-game schedule not this upcoming season. That would be crazy. In 2026, they're going to move to a 9-game schedule. This is a very interesting thing and has a number of things that will kind of follow after it, but let's get into the details first. Every team is going to play 3 games that they play every single year. So I think the easiest one to kind of peg is going to be Texas. They're going to play A&M. They're going to play Oklahoma. They're probably going to play Arkansas every single year. Those are the 3 ties they have, the 3 quote-unquote rivalries they have in the conference. Have to imagine those are going to be those 3 teams. Everyone else is a little bit nebulous. There's a couple of teams that will be kind of interesting matchups, but at the end of the day aren't outright rivalries. They'll figure that out. That'll be an interesting thing to watch. I think it's going to be roughly the way that we thought it was going to be a couple of years ago when all this started to kind of socialize. But this is a big deal. The other 6 games is going to be a rotating cast. So you're going to play everyone every 2 years. They're going to find a way for you to play everyone in the conference every 2 years. And you're going to play at your home against them and at their home against them every 4 years. So you're going to find a way to kind of rotate everyone in. So Texas A&M plays at Georgia 1 year, and then 2 years later, Georgia's at A&M for the first time in this entire time that A&M's been in the conference, which is absolutely crazy. Very happy that they're finding a way to rotate this thing a little bit more consistently. I think everyone understands that the conference discrepancies, that the schedule discrepancies within the SEC are pretty wide. Georgia is not playing the same schedule as Missouri. Florida is not playing the same schedule as Texas right now. This will even the scales a little bit. It will not even the scales entirely. There is almost no way to do that entirely with a conference full of 16 teams. That is too big to make it all totally even across the board. It'll help out. It'll make things a little bit easier. You add an Alabama to Texas schedule, let's just say, and you add a Vanderbilt to Georgia. So it's just totally random, but hypothetically, that would obviously even out things with those 2 groups. The thing we have to get into here, and the thing that will be very important when we're talking about this, is I've seen a lot of Big Ten people taking a victory lap, saying they push the SEC to do this, the SEC bend the knee to the Big Ten. That might be true. There is a world where that is true. I'm going to tell you right now, the SEC and the Big Ten individually, I don't know a lot of things about this sport. I do know for a fact the SEC and the Big Ten don't do anything that they don't want to do. They don't do anything that they are not inclined to do, that they are not promoted to do, that they do not want to do. They are the absolute tastemakers in the sport. They are the owners of the sport in a lot of different ways, are the SEC and the Big Ten. The SEC knows what it's doing. I can absolutely promise you that. And they know what it's doing because you saw the news earlier this week that the CFP was going to look at strength of schedule a little bit differently. This is going to make it even more tilted in the SEC's direction. Also, you have to play a team out of conference from the Power 4 conferences or Notre Dame. That's going to add to that even more. You might just see the top 16 teams in the country in strength of schedule are the SEC teams. I can almost promise you it's going to be some variation of something around that realm going forward. You're not going to like it if you're a Big Ten fan. You're not going to like it if you're a Big 12 fan. You're not going to like it if you're an ACC fan. But you yelled at the SEC for a really long time to do this. You yelled at the SEC to make all this happen, to go to 9 games, to stop being scared to play 9 conference games. You got what you asked for, and you're not going to like the result. I can almost promise you that. And also, I think the other thing that comes with this is a move in the playoff. I can almost promise you that something is going to happen with the playoff in the next, I'll say 10 days. I'll give myself a little bit of a buffer. I think it's going to happen in the next week. I think we're going to find out that we have new auto bids in the playoff in a 16 team, or we have a 5+11 format, which is what the SEC wants, not what the Big Ten wants. If the Big Ten made the trade of the SEC playing 9 scheduled games to get the 5+11, they made a really, really bad deal, and they're going to be very upset that they made that deal. But at the end of the day, something is going to happen with the playoff here pretty soon. I can absolutely promise you that. The SEC did not do this because they had to. They did not do this because they bent the knee to the Big Ten. They didn't do this if it did not benefit them. I can absolutely promise you that. I think you'll find out very soon that is going to benefit them pretty greatly, and even if they lose a couple more games throughout the season, it is going to benefit the SEC. They're going to get more teams in this playoff than they ever have before, and everyone's going to be whining about the strength of schedule not being correct. So we're going to find our place right back where we are right now, and people are going to be mad that the SEC gets preferential treatment when they ask for the SEC to play more tough games. So here we are. I love it. More good football. Cannot wait for that to get underway. I also understand that there are a lot of things happening behind the scenes that we do not see, and we cannot take this at face value. So it'll be interesting to watch. Overall, it'll be a very fascinating thing to watch. You're going to be really hard-pressed to convince me that the SEC didn't know exactly what it's doing and that the Big Ten is not fully on board with this decision and fully on board with what happens next, whether it's with the playoff or with whatever else. The SEC knows what it's doing. I can absolutely promise you that, and I can also promise you a lot of people that were pushing for this are not going to be happy about the results of this. Big Ten over there decided to quote-unquote socialize the idea of a 24 and 28 team conference playoff, or CFP, a CFP going forward. This isn't going to happen. I'll put it very plainly. This is to get everyone to not be super mad when they go to 16 teams. And they're going to go to 16 teams, I think, in the next week. I can almost promise you. But at the end of the day, this is just so people will say, oh, thank you. You went to 16 and not 24 or 28. They were never going to 24 or 28. Now, they might in the future. Frankly, I don't know where this stops for these people. But at the end of the day, the 28 team would have 7 auto bids for the Big Ten and the SEC. It would have 5 for the ACC and the Big 12, and about 4 at-large bids, maybe a group of 5 spot included in that. That's ridiculous. In like 10 different ways, that's ridiculous. A team that goes 4-4 in the SEC should not be in the playoff. A team that goes 4-5 or 5-4 in the Big Ten should not be in the playoff. We should not be opening this door to absolutely everyone, because then you lose the regular season that we all love. I get it. The 12 team is a little bit of a nebulous space when you come to how much it puts emphasis on the regular season. Does it make it more important? Does it make it less important? I can promise you the 24 or 28 team would kill both. It would kill conference championships. It would kill the regular season. It would make everything relatively pointless until you get deep into the season and you look up and you say, oh, I have 3 losses. I guess I got to win out the rest of the way. Or I have 1 loss. I can lose 2 out of my last 3 games and have no problem going into the playoff. This can't happen. And I can almost promise you it is not going to happen, at least in the short term. They are going to give you the 16 team and people are going to thank them. People are going to say, oh, thank goodness you didn't go to 24 or 28. They think you're dumb. I'm just going to be totally honest with you. Tony Petitti, Greg Sankey, a lot of people running the sport think you're dumb and they're trying to lull you into that. Do not let them. Be very mad if they expand this thing again. Now, some of you will be more than happy. Some of you want 16 teams. If you want 16 teams, get ready for 24. Get ready for 28. Get ready for 32, because that's the reality of the situation. It is why people were so mad about going from 4 to 12. It was why people did not want to expand the playoff or go into a playoff in the first place back in 2014, because it does not stop. There's not a moment where these people are going to look up and say, all right, that's enough money. That's enough time. That's enough shine. That's enough PR for my conference. They're going to continue to take. I think 12 is excessive. I think it's too many teams. I think once you get past 8, you have all the teams that can win a national title in your playoff. 24 would be insane. I think 16 is a little bit ridiculous, but I'd be fine to draw the line there. I'm just telling you the line will not be drawn there. The Big Ten and the SEC will continue to push this thing. They'll continue to try to get more of their teams in it, whether it's an auto bid or an at-large bid type format. It doesn't matter. These people want their teams in the dance. They want as many of their teams in the dance as they can possibly get. They will do whatever they need to do. I think 12 is excessive. I think 16 would be more than excessive, and I don't think it's going to stop there. So when they release this deal, which I think they're going to do for 16 teams in the playoff, do not say thank you. Do not be okay with it. Do not say, well, at least it's not 24 or 28. It doesn't matter. It's more teams, and it's going to be more teams every single offseason until we tell these people to stop or get them out of a position of power. But that's a totally different conversation for a totally different day. Point blank period. This is a dumb idea. This is not actually the idea on the table. They're just trying to get you to be okay with the idea on the table. A little bit brighter news around college football. Auburn is going to retire the Cam Newton's number 2 this upcoming season. It hasn't been handed out since 2010, so as you can imagine, this has been in the works for quite some time. Have to imagine that Deuce Knight wanted it this past offseason. He came in as number 2 from high school, but he's now wearing number 9. This was a layup. There's no doubt about that. I think every Auburn fan can understand why they're doing this. He went for 4,200 yards in 2010, 50 total touchdowns, 20 on the ground, which is outright ridiculous, and took an Auburn team that a lot of people have talked about did not have a lot of guys in the NFL after that. it took him to a national title in 2010. Will always be remembered and should always be remembered as one of the most dominant and impactful players in college football history. He's probably the best football player I've ever seen. Now, Joe Burrow came very, very close in that 2019 season. I've never seen anything quite like Cam Newton in an Auburn jersey. I've never seen anything quite like a guy that can hurdle over someone and then run through someone the next second. He was a nightmare, and he absolutely deserves this. This is absolutely a number that should be in Auburn history for quite some time. I think they would have wished that he just came there out of high school instead of going to Florida, but at the end of the day, he is an Auburn legend, and I don't think there's any question that you retire that number. Savion Hyder, I wish it was Hitter, but it is Hyder. Savion Hyder has committed to Michigan. This is massive. This is a huge, huge commitment. He's the top running back in the 2026 class, and that backfield is going to be downright terrifying going forward in Ann Arbor. I love Jordan Marshall. I think he's going to be a beast. Justice Haynes, a former 5-star as well. Savion Hyder coming in, and then Bryce Underwood in the middle of it. It's a nightmare. It's as talented of a group as you're going to find in just about any backfield going forward in the entire country. This kid's going to be really, really good. Now, everyone's going to be pushing for him until he puts pen to paper. I can absolutely promise you that. There's too good of a player. Too many big-time teams are after him to at least not give calls. Now, I don't know what the dollar number is for Michigan, so I don't know how many teams can match that number, but at the end of the day, this is a very, very talented kid. Michigan knows who they are, and they're going to go out and get the best running backs in the country, and they're going to run it down your throat. This guy's absolutely going to be part of it. Really wish his last name was Hitter. It is Hyder, so at the end of the day, it's going to be awesome to watch this kid, and Michigan's got a very bright future despite some mistakes in the past. They're going to be more than fine. They're going to land on their feet, and this kind of backs up that idea. Interesting news out of USC and UCLA. DJ Wingfield, a transfer from Purdue that was coming over to USC to be their starting left guard, is not going to get eligibility for this upcoming year. Caden Robinson, a UCLA wide receiver coming over from App State, is not either. Both these guys got their decisions denied in a court. It was definitely something that has gotten really blurry. I think it was roughly the same, argument these two guys had is the same argument that I think Diego Pavia had, and they had different, results to those deals. So I don't know what the rules are. I really don't know how to break this down. I really don't know what got in the way of these two guys playing this upcoming year. What I do know, it's a huge hit to that USC offensive line. It's a good group. I think they have guys that they can fill in there. I don't think any of them were going to be as experienced and as good as this kid was going to be. And then Caden Robinson at UCLA, I don't think he was going to be the number one wide receiver. I do think he was going to be a big-time player for them and someone they were going to rely on pretty heavily this upcoming season. Neither of them are going to have that player, and these guys are going to have to find their way off to the world, and that's going to be a really weird thing, very disappointing for these kids. No, it's hard to be mad at because a lot of these kids are, I don't want to say overstaying their welcome, but staying in college football for quite some time and quite a bit longer than some other guys in the past. That being said, it's really hard to not be upset when you see a decision very similar in structure to yours get a different decision than yours, and you're sitting there on the sideline while another kid's playing. I get how frustrating that is. Both these kids are very talented, and they're going to have to find something different. They also lose out on quite a bit of money because of this decision. So a little bit tough for these kids, no doubt about it. I think the eligibility rules are complicated and really confusing right now, and I think it's going to lead to situations like this where you just don't really know what the rules are going into any given year. We're almost out of this with COVID being so far in the rear view, but at the end of the day, this is one of the final casualties, we'll say, of this kind of COVID eligibility confusion. And then we won't waste too much time on this, but there's a comment made by Joe Burrow's old coach, Ed Orgeron, saying Arch Manning's as close as he's seen to Joe Burrow since he's been out of football or since he's been with that 2019 team. This isn't all that surprising to me. I'll be totally honest with you. I understand what he's saying. I want to be very, very clear. That doesn't mean that I think Arch Manning's going to put up a Joe Burrow type year. Obviously, these are just words. Obviously, we don't know what's going to be happen this upcoming year. But it's not just random people saying this kid is special. It is coaches that have seen what special looks like on every sense of the word, and they're saying this guy's very much like it. All of the noise will be very interesting, and that obviously doesn't mean very much. Does continue to add pressure to this kid's shoulders. And in 8 days, we'll see what happens. We'll see if you can relieve some of that or live up to that or not live up to that. I think the expectations might be a little bit out of reach for anyone in the country, but at the end of the day, the expectations continue to get larger. The kid is uniquely talented, and just about everyone's telling you so. So at the end of the day, if you're someone that totally denies what Arch Manning can be, you might want to rethink that, because it seems like a lot of people that know a lot about football are telling you to think differently. But We won't know until 8 days from now when they face off against Ohio State. We will not know how this all will unfold, but for right now, we have a game tomorrow. We have college football coming back tomorrow. The best sport in the world is going to be on TV tomorrow at noon. I can't wait. It's been 214 days since we've had a college football game, since Ohio State lifted the trophy, and we get back to it tomorrow. It is as good a time of year as you will ever have. It is always so much fun. A lot of people are relatively upset, including a number of girlfriends around the country. At the end of the day, it's going to be an incredible time. We have Saturday football for the rest of the year, all the way up until, I believe, January 20th. Again, this upcoming year is going to be the national title. We got it all. Just strap in, enjoy it. It's going to be all over the place. I can almost promise you it is going to be crazy, and just enjoy it all. Just take it all in, because college football is officially back, and it's going to be an incredible one. I can promise you that. But thank you so much for tuning in to just another college football podcast. It has been awesome to go through this offseason with you guys. Now we get into the real fun of the season, and I will be back on Monday to break down week 0, to get into some more fall camp stuff, to get into all the stuff as we get ready for what I consider to be the very best week 1 that we have ever had in college football history. But we got a game to get to first. We got a top 25 matchup. Cannot wait for it in Dublin, Ireland tomorrow. Enjoy it all. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you guys on Monday.